My name is Elizabeth Gary. I'm 70 years old, and on the morning of my birthday, I opened a gift bag from my son and his wife that still had the drugstore receipt stuffed inside it. Not a price sticker, the full printed receipt, folded twice and shoved back down into the bag like it was trash. $5.43. A bottle of lotion, clearance sticker on the bottom, 70% off. Still in the wrinkled white CVS bag with the red logo on the side. No tissue paper, no ribbon, no card, just the lotion and the receipt. And my son standing across from me in his kitchen, smiling, like he'd done something right. I was wearing my good blue dress, the one I iron and hang up for church and for occasions that matter. I had pressed it that morning before I left Dayton. Put on my pearl earrings, the ones Raymond gave me for our 30th anniversary, because this was my 70th birthday, 7 decades on this earth, and I wanted to look like that meant something. I held that CVS bag with both hands. I looked at the receipt. I looked at my son Bob. Then I smiled. I said, "Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Brenda." And inside, very quietly, something that had been sleeping in me for a long time opened its eyes and made a decision. Now stay with me, because what I did the next morning they never saw coming. But first I need to take you back 3 weeks, to a Tuesday afternoon in October, when I was sitting at my son's dining room table sorting through his late father's paperwork, and I heard something through a kitchen door that I was not supposed to hear. That is where this story really starts. Before I go any further, I want to give you the full picture, because this story is not about one bad gift. It never is. My son Robert Gary, everyone calls him Bob, is 44 years old. He works in commercial insurance in Columbus, Ohio. Good job. Good salary. He married Brenda 6 years ago. No children. They live in a 4-bedroom house in Westerville, Ohio. 2-car garage. Kitchen they remodeled last spring. I know about the remodel because Brenda posts everything on Facebook. The marble countertops. The new farmhouse sink. The cabinet poles that cost $14 each. I counted them in the photos. 22 cabinet poles. $308 in hardware alone. I know because I am a retired bookkeeper. Numbers are how I make sense of the world. I am good at seeing what the numbers say when everything else is unclear. My late husband Raymond and I raised Bob in Dayton, Ohio. 1 child. We were not wealthy people, but we were present people. I attended every school play, every parent-teacher conference, every baseball game, even when they ran past 9 on a Tuesday night. Raymond coached Bob's Little League team for 4 straight years. He drove to 6 different states for away tournaments. He never missed a single game. Not one. He kept a scorebook, kept it for all 4 years. When Bob went off to college, Raymond put it in a box in the closet, and I found it after he died. I still have it. When Bob went to Ohio State, I drove to Columbus every month, brought groceries, helped him navigate financial aid paperwork. When he got his first apartment after graduation, I drove up and spent a long October weekend helping him paint it. Just the 2 of us. Bob on the roller, me cutting in along the trim and the baseboards, the radio playing old country because neither of us could find the station we wanted. We talked the whole weekend about his future, about his father, about the kind of man he wanted to be. That was a good weekend. I have thought about it often over the past year. When Bob met Brenda at a work conference, he called me from the restaurant parking lot after their second date. "Mom, I think she might be the one." I said, "Bob, bring her to dinner and let me form my own opinion." He laughed. He always laughed when I was direct. That is a thing I have missed. Brenda came to dinner. Polished, smart, She talked about her work in pharmaceutical sales, her gym routine, her mother Sandra in Scottsdale, Arizona. She mentioned Sandra 4 times in 90 minutes. I noticed, but I kept my thoughts to myself. Because it was a first dinner. Because every daughter is allowed to love her mother. Because I wanted to give Brenda a real chance. I tried. I am still trying. After the wedding, things shifted. Not suddenly. The way a house settles over time. You don't see the cracks until you look at the wall in a certain kind of morning light. First Thanksgiving after the wedding, they went to Scottsdale. Sandra was alone after her divorce. I understood. I made my own turkey and invited my neighbor Ruth. Fine. Second year, Scottsdale for Thanksgiving and Christmas. I got a 15-minute phone call Christmas morning. Bob sounded like he was between things. Fine. Third year, Raymond got sick. Pancreatic cancer. Fast and brutal. 8 months from diagnosis to gone. During those 8 months, Bob came home when he could. 3 times. I will not say the number again, because it still sits somewhere wrong in my chest. Brenda came twice. Both visits were short. She was gracious, brought casseroles, sat with me at the kitchen table. But she was always half present, always glancing at her phone. I noticed. I said nothing, because Raymond was dying and I had nothing left for anything else. Survival doesn't leave room for grievances. You get through the day, pack a lunch, drive to the hospital, come home, do it again. Raymond died on a Tuesday in March. Bob flew in the night before. He made it. He held his father's hand. I am grateful for that. Nothing takes that away. After the funeral, after the food from the neighbors was gone, after the sympathy cards stopped coming, the silence started. Bob called every Sunday for about 6 weeks. Then every other Sunday. Then twice a month. Then when he thought of it, I always kept the calls short. Told him I was fine. Said don't worry. Said you have your own life. I thought I was being strong, not a burden. What I was actually doing was teaching my son to stop looking. He learned that lesson exactly as well as I taught it. That is the part that took me the longest to understand. I had written the story. He just believed it. I am a retired bookkeeper. I understand accounts. I understand what happens when you make withdrawals without replenishing. I let 3 years of withdrawals go by without a word. And then one October afternoon, I sat at my son's dining room table and heard something through a half-open kitchen door that made me understand it was time to say something. Let me tell you about Sandra Hollis. I will be fair, because this story is not about Sandra. Sandra did not do anything wrong, but you need the full context. Sandra is 67 years old, lives in Scottsdale, Arizona, plays pickleball 3 days a week, and posts her scores on Facebook. She is active, energetic, engaged with the people around her. She calls Bob twice a week. She texts Brenda photos of sunsets and recipes, and articles she thinks Brenda would enjoy. She sends birthday cards with handwritten notes 3 weeks early, so they arrive on time. She asks for help. She asks often. She asks without apology or embarrassment, and Bob and Brenda respond to that. They fly to Scottsdale twice a year. They take Sandra to dinner. They fix things around her house. When Brenda had a work trip to Phoenix, she extended her stay by 2 extra days just to spend them with Sandra. I know this because Brenda posted photos. The 2 of them at a garden, at a restaurant, at a spa afternoon, both smiling. Caption, my person, I am not Sandra Hollis. I am the woman who never asks, who says I'm fine, who says please don't go out of your way, who says you have your own life, don't worry about me. I spent decades making it easy for people to leave. I was proud of that. I called it independence. I had another name for it now. The summer before my 70th birthday, Sandra broke her wrist. minor fracture, outpatient, home the same afternoon. Bob and Brenda flew to Scottsdale the following weekend. 5 days. Bob took time off work. They repainted Sandra's guest bathroom while they were there. Sage green, Brenda posted. Nothing but love for this woman. 23 people liked it. I was one of them. I pressed the like button and set my phone face down on the kitchen counter. That same summer, I had both knees replaced. The doctor suggested doing them together for efficiency. I said yes because I didn't want to go through it twice. 3 weeks in a rehabilitation facility in Dayton, then home on a walker, then a cane. Bob called 3 times during those 3 weeks. He offered to come. I said, "No, I'm fine. I have the physical therapists." He said, "Are you sure, Mom?" I said, "I'm sure." He said, "Okay," and I heard the relief in his voice. The door was open. I closed it myself. My neighbor Ruth brought me groceries every Tuesday, all through the recovery. Ruth is 73, drives a 15-year-old Honda with 200,000 miles on it. She has arthritis in her hands and her own bad knee. She came every Tuesday without being asked, without being told I was fine. She just came. After I was walking again, I sat in Raymond's chair one evening, and I thought about it clearly, not with anger, with the particular clarity that comes from looking at a thing directly and refusing to look away. The numbers were simple. Sandra Hollis, minor wrist fracture, home same day. Bob and Brenda flew to Arizona, 5 days, repainted a bathroom. Elizabeth Gary, both knees replaced, 3 weeks in rehabilitation. Bob and Brenda, 3 phone calls. I did not feel sorry for myself. I felt something more useful. I had created this. I had been the author of my own invisibility. I had the power to write something different. I just had to decide to pick up the pen. October, Bob called and asked if I could come to Columbus. He had a box of Raymond's old insurance documents and didn't know where to begin. I said yes, drove 90 minutes on a gray Tuesday morning, sat at his dining room table with a legal pad and pen and manila folders. 30 years of Raymond's careful paperwork. I sorted it, organized it, labeled each folder, built Bob a system he could follow, so he wouldn't have to figure it out, because that is what I do. I make things easier for the people I love. I have been doing that my whole life. While I worked, I could hear Bob in the kitchen. The door between the rooms was half open. He was on his phone with Brenda, laughing. Easy. He didn't know I could hear him. Yeah, the Miraval package. Yeah, 3 nights, the full thing. Massages and the champagne welcome and the VIP sunset tickets. No, I already added those. She's going to completely lose her mind. Sandra's going to love it. $2,650 total, but she's worth every penny. I kept writing on my legal pad. Date, policy number, beneficiary. From the kitchen, Bob laughed at something Brenda said. From the dining room, I wrote Prudential Life Insurance Policy number 4471, B, beneficiary, Robert Allen Gary. I sat with that for the rest of the afternoon. On the drive home through the flat, gray Ohio fields, I turned it over. $2,650. Massages, champagne welcome, VIP sunset event tickets for Sandra Hollis turning 67. 3 weeks after that phone call, I would be turning 70, 7 decades, a milestone birthday, the kind of birthday that deserves something more than 30 seconds of thought. I thought about that October weekend in Bob's first apartment, 23 years ago, the radio playing, the smell of fresh paint, Bob tall and young, talking about his future, the two of us building something together. I thought about Raymond's empty chair, about 3 years of short phone calls, about Ruth's 15-year-old Honda parked in my driveway every Tuesday. By the time I pulled into my driveway in Dayton that evening, I had already decided. My birthday is November 14th. I turned 70 on a Saturday. In the morning, I made my sweet potato casserole, the one with the brown sugar and pecan crust. Raymond used to ask for it at every Thanksgiving. He said it was the best thing I made. I made it for my own birthday dinner, because that is what I do. I contribute. I always contribute. I have been contributing to other people's tables since before Bob was born. I arrived at Bob and Brenda's house at 4 o'clock. Good blue dress, pearl earrings, hair done the day before at Patricia's on Elm Street. Patricia asked, "Where are you going tomorrow?" I said, "My son's for my birthday." She said, "How wonderful." And I smiled and said, "Yes." Bob hugged me at the door. The hug was genuine. I want to say that clearly. Bob loves me. He has never not loved me. I have never questioned that. What I have come to understand is that love without attention, love without effort, love without intention starts to feel like something else after a while. It starts to feel like an assumption, like a piece of furniture in a room, present, unnoticed. Brenda was in the kitchen, finishing the roast. She called out, "Elizabeth, welcome. Glasses are on the counter." I poured a small glass of white wine, set my casserole on the counter, looked at the kitchen, the marble countertops, the farmhouse sink, the 22 cabinet pulls. I thought about the $600 I gave them last Christmas. For home improvements, I had said, here were the home improvements. Beautiful kitchen. My contribution was somewhere in those countertops, quietly absorbed. Dinner was good. The roast was good. Brenda baked a chocolate layer cake. My favorite. She remembered. I gave her credit for that. We lit the candles. They sang happy birthday. Bob loud and off-key. Brenda quiet and slightly flat. I laughed, blew out the candles, made a wish. After the cake, Bob said, "Mom, we have something for you." He stood up from the table, went to the hall closet, came back holding a gift bag, white bag, red trim, CVS logo on the side, slightly wrinkled, like it had been sitting at the bottom of a closet for a while. I looked at the bag. I looked at Bob. He was smiling. Brenda was looking at her phone under the edge of the table. I reached inside. One item, a bottle of hand and body lotion, white cap, pale pink label, the kind they keep near the register next to the reading glasses and the travel size items. I turned it over. Clearance sticker on the bottom, 70% off. And there at the top of the bag, visible without even reaching for it, the receipt, still folded, stuffed back in, $5.43. Total. I stood there holding that bag in my good blue dress with my pearl earrings on, in the kitchen with the $14 cabinet pulls. 3 weeks after I heard my son plan a $2,600 spa trip for another woman's birthday, and I looked at the receipt. Bob said, "We know you love lotion, Mom." Still smiling. He genuinely meant it well. He genuinely believed this was fine. That was the part that went deepest. Not cruelty, unawareness. They had not thought about me long enough to realize they hadn't thought about me at all. I held the bottle. I smiled. I said, "Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Brenda." I set the lotion on the table, and I let the evening continue. I helped clear the dishes. I listened to Brenda talk about her work trip to Chicago, about the kitchen remodel, about Sandra's pickleball season. I asked questions. I was present and pleasant because that is who I am, and because I had already decided the conversation was going to happen, but not tonight, not in their house, not while the feeling was still raw. I drove home, 90 minutes on I-70 in the November dark. I did not cry. I thought. I planned. By the time I pulled into my driveway in Dayton at 9:15, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I got out of the car, went inside, hung up my good blue dress, washed my face, got into bed, set my alarm for 7, went to sleep. Some decisions need a night of sleep to settle into. This one did. Sunday morning, November 15th, 7 o'clock. I woke up, got dressed, made my coffee, sat at Raymond's desk by the window, the one where he sat every Sunday morning to pay the bills. His reading glasses were still in the top right drawer. I had not moved them. I opened my laptop. First, I looked up Miraval, Arizona Resort to confirm the number I had heard Bob say 3 weeks earlier, $2,650. 3 nights for 1 person, spa services, champagne welcome, VIP sunset event tickets, something the website called curated wellness experiences. I looked at the photos of the rooms and the pools and the treatment suites. Beautiful place. Closed the browser tab. Then I opened a folder on my desktop that I had been keeping for 3 years. Not out of planning, out of habit. I am a bookkeeper. I track things. 3 columns. Date. Amount. Purpose. 3 years of what I had given Bob and Brenda. $600. Home improvement gift last Christmas. $400. Emergency help when Brenda's car needed repair in February. $300. Birthday and anniversary gifts over 3 years. $220. Gas and meals on 4 90-minute drives I made to Columbus to help them with things they asked for. $150. A contribution to a graduation gift for Brenda's nephew. Bob had asked. Total, $1,670. From a woman on a fixed income. From a retired bookkeeper living alone in Dayton on Raymond's life insurance and her own pension. I sat with that number. Then I opened a new document. 1 page. No long list. No accusations. No dramatic language. Just the facts and 1 request. I wrote, Bob, I love you. I have always loved you. Nothing in this letter changes that. On November 14th, I turned 70. The gift you gave me was from the CVS clearance bin. The receipt was still in the bag. 3 weeks before my birthday, I heard you planning a $2,650 spa trip for Sandra's birthday. I am not writing because I think love is measured in dollars. I am writing because I believe love is measured in effort, and I need you to see the difference between the effort you made for her and the effort you made for me. I have attached something. It is not a bill. It is a record I kept because that is what I do. I am not asking for repayment. I am asking you to sit with this. Then I would like us to talk. Your mother, Elizabeth. I read it 4 times, changed 2 words, printed it along with the spreadsheet, put both in a manila envelope, addressed it to Bob's Columbus address, drove to the post office, mailed it priority mail, $3.85. He would have it by Monday afternoon. I drove home, made another cup of coffee, sat in Raymond's chair by the window, his photo on the side table, the one from our anniversary dinner, him laughing, head back, eyes crinkled up. I said, okay, Raymond. I finally said something. He used to tell me, Elizabeth, your patience is a virtue, and it is also your problem. He was right. He was almost always right. I should have listened sooner. Monday afternoon, 4:17. My phone rang. Bob. I let it ring. Not from fear. Because I needed to be fully calm when I picked up. I knew myself well enough to know I was not quite there yet. 4:30. He called again. I answered. Mom. His voice had the sound of a man who walked into a familiar room and found the furniture rearranged. Not angry. Confused. Bob. I got your letter. I know. Why didn't you say something Saturday? Because on Saturday, you were smiling, and I needed to think before I spoke. Silence. The kind with weight in it. Mom, I didn't know you felt this way. That is part of the problem, Bob. I heard him exhale slowly. He said, you kept a spreadsheet. I said, I keep records of everything. I'm a bookkeeper. What's unusual is not the record. What's unusual is what it shows. He didn't argue. Bob never was a man who argued to win. He was a man who argued to understand. That has always been one of his best qualities. He said, the Sandra trip was important to us. She's had a hard year. I said, I had both knees replaced this summer, Bob. I spent 3 weeks in a rehabilitation facility in Dayton. Silence. He said, you told me you were fine. I said, I know. That is something I am going to stop doing. He was quiet for a while. Then he said, the lotion. He said it quietly, to himself. I let him sit with it. He said, I didn't choose it. Brenda grabbed it on the way out. That's not an excuse. I said, no, Bob, it isn't. He said, I know. We talked for 40 minutes. Not a fight. A real conversation. The kind that matters. He cried a little at the end. I didn't. I had already done my crying 2 nights after my birthday, alone in my kitchen, when the clarity had settled and the sadness underneath finally came through. I cried it out then. So when I talked to Bob, I could stay clear. At the end, he said, what do you want me to do, Mom? I said, I want you to think about this for a few days. Then tell me the answer, without me having to ask for it. He said, okay. I said, I love you, Bob. He said, I love you too. I'm so sorry. I said, I know. 20 minutes later, Brenda called. I let that one go to voicemail. I wasn't ready. I needed to be rested. Wednesday, Brenda called again. I answered. She started before I could say hello. Elizabeth, I don't appreciate the tone of that letter. I kept my voice level. Good morning, Brenda. I feel like you're blaming me for something that isn't entirely fair. I said, I'm not blaming anyone. The letter was addressed to Bob. She said, we're a couple. What affects him affects me. I said, then I'm glad you're both thinking about it. Pause. She said, my mother has been alone since the divorce. She needs more support than most. I said, I have been alone since Raymond died. 3 years this coming March. She said, those aren't really the same situation. I said, I'm not asking you to treat them as the same. I'm asking not to be treated as though I have no needs at all. She went quiet. I said, Brenda, the receipt was still in the bag. Silence. I said, not the lotion itself. I understand grabbing something last minute, but the receipt was left inside. That tells me nobody spent more than 30 seconds thinking about my birthday. I heard her breathe. Something shifted, not dramatically, subtly, like a woman who has been bracing against something and finally lets her shoulders drop an inch. She said, I should have put more thought into it. I know that. I said, I know you know that. She said, I genuinely didn't think you'd be this hurt. I said, I know. That's also something I want to change going forward. I want you to know me well enough to know that this would hurt. We talked for 26 minutes. Not warm, but honest. The most honest conversation Brenda and I had ever had in 6 years. By the end, there was something between us that hadn't been there before. Not closeness, something more fundamental, honesty. And I have always valued honesty more than warmth. Warmth without honesty is a surface. Honesty without warmth is a start. After I hung up, I sat in Raymond's chair, looked at his photo. Okay, 2 conversations. He would have said, you see, Elizabeth, not so terrible. He always made difficult things sound manageable. That was his gift. In the weeks that followed, things changed. Not all at once. Not dramatically. Real relationships don't transform overnight. They shift like a river changes course. Slowly, quietly. You don't notice it's happening until one day you look back and the water is running somewhere new. Bob called the following Sunday. Without being prompted, he just called. We talked for 45 minutes about Raymond, about Little League, about the painting weekend, about the way his father laughed at his own jokes before he got to the punchline, so hard that he could barely finish telling them. I had not laughed talking about Raymond in a long time. I had not talked about him like that with Bob in 2 years, without the call feeling like a task, without the pauses stretching, just two people talking about a man they both loved. He said, "Mom, I didn't realize how much I pulled back after Dad died." I said, "It happens slowly. You don't notice it while it's happening." He said, "That doesn't make it okay." I said, "No, but it means it's fixable. A mistake you don't understand can't be fixed. A mistake you understand can." He said, "I'd like to come see you. Not for a holiday, just to see you." I said, "I'd like that." 2 weekends later, he drove to Dayton on a Saturday morning. Without Brenda, just Bob. Brought coffee from the place in Columbus he knows I like. We sat at my kitchen table for 3 hours. Went through old photo albums. Went through Raymond's record collection in the hall closet. Bob found a Nat King Cole album he hadn't seen since he was about 10 years old. He held it carefully, turned it over. We were quiet together for a while. Not an uncomfortable quiet, the good kind. The kind that means the space between two people is full without words. At some point, Bob picked up the CVS lotion from my kitchen counter. I had left it there. He turned it over, read the clearance sticker, said quietly, "Mom, I am genuinely ashamed." I said, "Don't be ashamed, Bob. Be different." He set it down. He nodded. That was all. No long apology. No performance. Just the truth between us and a nod. That was enough. He told me something that afternoon I hadn't known. After the letter arrived, Brenda had called Sandra, told her everything. The letter, the comparison, the receipt in the bag. Sandra said she had no idea, said she was embarrassed, wished she had known. I thought about that. Sandra Hollis didn't plan any of this. She didn't ask for the spa trip. She didn't know what I received. She couldn't have compared the two. This was never Sandra's fault. This was never even really about Sandra. It was about whether I was seen in my own son's life. And I found out that I was. He had just stopped showing it. We had both played a role in that. The week after Bob's visit, Brenda called again. Her voice was different, less polished, more human, like a woman who had been sitting with something uncomfortable long enough to stop looking away from it. She said, "I'd like to start over with you, if you're willing." I said, "That is more than okay, Brenda." She said, "I've been thinking about what you said, about not knowing you'd be hurt. I've been wondering whether that was really true, or whether I just didn't want to look." I held the phone still, because that costs something. That kind of honesty requires a person to put down their defenses and say, "I might have been wrong." Not many people can do that. I said, "I appreciate you saying that." She said, "I want to do better." I said, "Then we're already in a better place than we were a month ago." And we were. Not perfect. Not the relationship I might have built from the beginning if we had been different people. But honest. Real. And real is always worth more than smooth. I want to talk to you directly now. If you are a woman in your 60s or 70s watching this, this is for you. I made a mistake for more years than I like to count. I called it grace. I called it being the bigger person. I told myself that strong women don't complain, that good mothers don't burden their children, that independent women handle things on their own. But underneath all those good-sounding words was silence. And silence is not strength. Silence just gives distance a place to settle and grow. I spent 3 years after Raymond died, making myself smaller, saying I'm fine when I was not fine at all, saying don't worry when I desperately needed someone to worry, saying you have your own life, Bob. Don't put yourself out for me. I thought I was protecting him from the burden of a grieving mother. What I was actually doing was teaching him to stop coming. He learned exactly as well as I taught him. That is the part that was hardest for me to sit with. I was the one who wrote that story. He just read it. Here is what I know now at 71 years old. The people who love you need to be told how to love you well, not manipulated, not guilt, just told, directly, kindly, but clearly. I need a call on my birthday, not a text, a call. When I had surgery, I needed you there. I am not fine all the time. I will stop saying that I am. That is not weakness. That is not desperation. That is the truth. And truth is the only foundation a real relationship can stand on. My fear for all those years was simple. What if I said I need you? And Bob looked at me and said, I know, Mom. I just don't want to. That was what I was protecting myself from, finding out I didn't matter enough. But when I finally spoke the truth, I found out I did matter. I found out Bob had been operating on the assumption I was fine because I had told him I was fine for 3 years straight. That is not entirely his fault. I wrote the story. He believed it. Now, something practical, because this channel is about real women and real information, not just stories. Many of us in our 60s and 70s have given generously to our adult children. Money, time, labor. We helped them get established. We showed up in emergencies. We contributed to things we were asked to contribute to, and we often did it quietly, without tracking it, without asking whether we could really spare it, without expecting anything back. If that is your situation, I want to ask you some simple questions. Do you know exactly what you have in your retirement savings right now? Do you know what your monthly income is and what your monthly expenses are? Have you spoken to a financial advisor in the last 2 years? These are not complicated questions, but they are important ones because there is a real difference between giving from abundance and giving from fear. Giving from abundance feels like generosity. Giving from fear feels like buying peace. And it almost never buys what you hoped. I was giving from fear. Fear that if I stopped contributing, Bob would stop calling. Fear that my worth was tied to my usefulness. Fear that an older woman with nothing left to offer would be an older woman alone. I know that fear. It lived in my chest for 3 years. And here is what I know now. That fear was a liar. Bob didn't need my money to love me. He needed me to tell him the truth. That was all. And telling the truth cost me nothing but the courage to do it. Raymond used to say, you cannot pour from an empty cup. He was talking about energy, but it is true of money. It is true of everything you give. Know what you have. Know what you need. Talk to your bank. Look at your retirement accounts. Talk to a financial advisor if you can. Make sure your own foundation is solid before you try to shore up everyone else's. You are allowed to take care of yourself. You are allowed to say, I gave what I could, and I cannot give more right now. You are allowed to have needs. You are allowed to say them out loud. At 70 years old, at 80 years old, at any age, you are allowed. You have lived long enough. You have buried people. You have raised people. You have kept households running and families together. You have shown up for everyone for decades. It is time to show up for yourself. Let me tell you about my 71st birthday. 3 weeks before it, Bob called on a Tuesday evening. He said, Mom, I want to plan something for your birthday. Something real this year. What would you like to do? He asked. He actually asked what I wanted. Not, we're having dinner at the house. Not, come up to Columbus. He said, what would you like? I said, I'd like to go to a nice restaurant. Here in Dayton, not Columbus. Somewhere with white tablecloths. Good wine. And I want you to drive to me this year. I've been making that 90-minute drive for a long time. He said, then we'll come to you. On November 14th, Bob and Brenda drove to Dayton. Arrived at 3 in the afternoon. Brenda came through the door, holding flowers from a florist on Oak Street, deep red dahlias in brown paper. She handed them to me at the door. She said, Happy birthday, Elizabeth. She said my name. She almost never used my name. She had been calling me nothing at all for 6 years. That day she said, Elizabeth, small thing, but it told me she had been thinking. We went to the Florentine on 5th Street, white tablecloths, a good wine list, a small table by the front window. Bob had called ahead and asked them to put a candle on the table. He told me when we sat down. He said it quietly. I called ahead. 3 words. But they meant, I thought about this, ahead of time, on purpose, for you. He gave me a card, not printed, online, selected from an actual card rack somewhere. Inside, his handwriting, blocky and imperfect, the same handwriting he's had since 2nd grade. His teacher used to call it enthusiastic. Mom, I should have been paying more attention. I am going to do better. Happy birthday. No big promises. No flourish. Just the truth in block letters. Brenda gave me a gift, wrapped with real paper, ribbon tied at the top. Inside, a photo album. She had reached out to relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Collected photos I'd never seen before. Raymond and me when we were young, when I had dark hair. And we stood in front of our first house on Magnolia Street. Bob as a baby, round-faced and serious-looking, the way he always was. Raymond holding Bob up at a game in 1992, both of them grinning at the camera. Organized by decade. Small captions in Brenda's neat handwriting underneath each photo. On the last page, an empty space. A note in her handwriting, to be filled in with more. I sat at that table with my son and his wife across from me, and I turned to the last page, and I sat with those words, to be filled in with more. I am not a sentimental woman. I don't cry at commercials. I don't gush. But I sat in that restaurant by the window on November 14th, my 71st birthday, and I felt it. Not sentimentality. Something more solid. Relief. That this is what I wanted. Not a spa resort. Not champagne welcome packages. This. A table they drove 90 minutes to reach. An album someone spent real time building. 3 words from a man who called ahead. After dinner, Bob paid the check before I could reach for my purse. On the drive home, Brenda sat in the front seat and talked to me in the back seat. Not about Sandra. Not about the kitchen remodel. She asked me about Raymond, what he was like when Bob was small. She had never asked me about Raymond in 6 years. I told her about the Little League tournaments, about the drive to Indiana in a snowstorm when Bob was 9, about the painting weekend, about the radio playing. She listened. She asked follow-up questions. She remembered the details the next time we talked. When they left that evening, Brenda hugged me at the door. A real hug, the kind you feel. She said, we'll do this again. I said, yes, we will. That night I sat in Raymond's chair. The house quiet, the good blue dress still on. I looked at his photo. I said, I think we're going to be okay. Raymond, we're going to be okay. Brenda texts me every Sunday now. Short. Thinking of you, Elizabeth. 3 words. Every Sunday. 3 words are not nothing. 3 words mean someone set a reminder, thought about me, sent something, After years of silence, 3 words on a Sunday is not nothing. It is proof. Bob calls on Tuesdays. He started that after my letter. He has not missed a Tuesday in almost a year. Some calls are an hour. Some are 10 minutes. But he calls every Tuesday without being reminded. Last month, he asked if I'd like to come to Columbus more often. I said, I think you should keep coming here. He laughed. That laugh. Head back. Eyes crinkled. His father's laugh. He came the following Saturday with groceries and made Raymond's chili from the recipe I had written out for him years ago. He found it in a kitchen drawer. Called me 3 times from the grocery store. What kind of beans, Mom? How much chili powder? Do I need the smoked paprika? Yes, Bob. Yes, on the smoked paprika. We ate at the kitchen table. He stayed until 9. At the door, he said, same time next month? I said, same time next month. I still have the CVS lotion. It's on my bathroom shelf. I use it some mornings. It's actually a decent lotion. And every time I pick it up, I think that $5 clearance bottle was the most valuable gift anyone gave me in 3 years. Not because of what it was, because of what it started, because it was the thing that finally made me stop being silent. My name is Elizabeth Gary. I am 71 years old. I am a retired bookkeeper from Dayton, Ohio. I am a widow. I am a mother. And I am a woman who spent too many years saying I'm fine. I am not giving you that advice. Say what you need. Say it clearly. Say it calmly. Say it once. But say it because the people who love you cannot find you in your silence. And I was silent for a very long time. If this story reached something in you, leave me a comment. Tell me, what's the thing you've been holding in? Or tell me, when did you finally speak up? And if you know a woman who needs to hear this, a mother, a grandmother, a friend who is always the strong one, always fine, always managing, share this with her. Not because she needs to send a letter, but because she needs to know she is allowed to take up space. She is allowed to say what she needs. She always was. Thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next one.